They brought in helicopters, cadaver dogs and hundreds of volunteers, scoured creeks and pipeline corridors, and still the night keeps its secret. Police say they cannot confirm a late-night vehicle was near the Sullivan trailer in the hours before Jack and Lilly vanished, and investigators don't see that unproven report as central to the case. Hit subscribe and ring that bell now for verified updates as this investigation continues to move forward. On paper, the timeline looks simple. 2 young children reported missing from a rural backwoods home, a frenzied initial search, and then months of painstaking forensics, video review, and follow-up. In practice, the picture is jagged, a patchwork of witness accounts, family statements, partial evidence, and repeated public appeals. That gap between what is reported on social feeds and what investigators can verify is the core challenge here. The RCMP publicly confirmed this week that while neighbors told police they heard vehicles driving near the trailer late on May 1st into the early hours of May 2nd, surveillance footage and other checks did not corroborate those accounts. Investigators reviewed camera files from the area and found no images showing a vehicle moving along the road at the times the witnesses described. In plain terms, people reported hearing a car, but no video evidence could place a driver on that stretch of road during the critical early morning window. The RCMP has therefore cautioned that those vehicle reports have not been substantiated and, importantly, that they are not considered a key element in the current investigation. That assessment doesn't mean the reports are irrelevant. It means investigators must be careful with how much weight they assign to them. Witness testimony can be powerful when it matches objective traces, a dashcam plate read, a traffic camera capture, or phone pings, but on its own it's brittle. Nighttime sounds travel oddly in rural terrain, and shadows and tree leans can distort perception. Investigators are trained to treat every tip seriously while also seeking corroboration before elevating any single lead to a cornerstone of the case. That's why police spent weeks canvassing for footage, pulling phone and bank records via court orders where justified, and testing any trace that could be independently verified. The message from frontline investigators has been consistent. They will follow credible leads, but they will not let speculation replace evidence. For families and communities desperate for answers, that careful restraint can be maddening. For investigators, it's a legal and scientific necessity. The basic story the family initially gave police was that on May 2nd the mother reported the children missing after they had not attended school due to illness the day before and earlier that morning. The mother's report placed the time she raised the alarm at about 10 a.m., a time that sets the administrative clock for searchers and detectives alike. Amid the flurry of activity that day, however, the last fully verified public record of the children places them on May 1st in New Glasgow, a clip showing the family at a Dollarama that afternoon. That frame becomes an anchor in the investigation. It is an objective timestamp that helps investigators pin down movements in the 24-hour window that followed. From that anchor, detectives work outward, overlaying phone metadata, witness recollections, and the physical evidence that searchers collected. The contrast between a concrete camera frame in New Glasgow and the more chaotic, memory-shaped accounts of what happened overnight is where much of the investigative energy goes. Finding a clear, verifiable trace between those points, a camera showing a vehicle, a bank transaction confirming a trip, a phone ping proving location, would dramatically narrow the search parameters. Without that bridge, however, reconstructing the critical hours becomes exponentially harder. What followed the missing persons call was a large-scale search that drew in RCMP major crime resources, volunteer teams, drones, and canine units. Investigators deliberately treated this as both a search and rescue and a forensics-driven operation. In rural environments, the initial response must balance speed, cover as much ground as possible while the chances of rescue are still viable, with preservation, keeping potential evidence intact for later laboratory testing. That balancing act explains the presence of hundreds of volunteers. They provide the manpower to sweep wide areas quickly. It also explains the later reliance on specialized units, drones to give aerial perspective, helicopters to reach inaccessible hollows, and cadaver dogs to detect the chemical signatures of human decomposition in places humans cannot see. Those specialized resources were deployed not to presume tragedy but to exhaust possibilities. When the dogs, flown in from other jurisdictions, indicated nothing actionable in the high-probability zones they were asked to check. Investigators considered that information meaningful but not definitive. Dogs are subject to environmental variables, and a negative canine alert reduces likelihood in specific searched areas at specific times. It does not prove absence everywhere or at all times. In the field, details surfaced that drew public attention and also forced more granular investigative steps. Neighbors reported hearing a vehicle late at night. One witness, Brad Wong, said he heard a loud car come and go 3 or 4 times after midnight and saw lights above the treetops from his elevated property. Another neighbor, Justin Smith, described hearing a vehicle near the railroad tracks at about 1:30 a.m., pausing, then continuing toward another road. Those auditory accounts carry instinctive power. People notice unusual noise in the pre-dawn stillness, but investigators must be precise about what such accounts can prove. Our CMP reviewed community surveillance footage and found no visual confirmation of vehicle movement at those times. That absence means investigators could not name a driver or vehicle based purely on those reports, and so they did not treat the claimed vehicle passages as a confirmed, core thread of the inquiry. Nonetheless, investigators logged the accounts and sought corroboration, every reasonable step when community reports describe activity near a key location. The reports of late-night vehicle movement were given added narrative weight because of the discovery of a piece of Lilly's pink blanket caught in a tree and nearby child-sized boot impressions. The blanket fragment and the boot prints became tangible physical clues that demanded forensic scrutiny. Police matched one of the boot impressions to the brand and tread that corresponded with footwear the family had for Lilly, a correlation that drew intense public speculation. For investigators, however, such matches are only the beginning. Forensic work requires controlling for contamination, establishing chain of custody, and verifying whether prints predated search activity or were created by well-meaning volunteers. In rural search scenarios, early volunteer traffic can easily overlay or confuse footprints, and objects can be displaced inadvertently. That is why the RCMP combined forensic testing on the blanket and other small items with an exhaustive review of video and digital evidence, rather than jumping to conclusions from circumstantial matches. The presence of the blanket piece was a lead worth following. The lack of video proof for a car near the road at the time complicated whether that lead indicated a natural wandering, staged movement, or another sequence of events entirely. While the RCMP continues to treat the case under missing persons protocols and to follow all lines of inquiry, independent volunteer groups have sought to supplement official searches. Please Bring Me Home, an Ontario-based not-for-profit, announced plans to deploy volunteers to revisit waterways and creeks near the property. Their rationale rests on practical factors. Waterways shift, visibility changes with seasons, and currents can move small objects or change what divers can detect. They plan to use tools like handheld sonar and to walk perimeters again as winter approaches and access changes. That approach can be valuable. Professional search and rescue teams and police often prioritize initial search grids and high-likelihood areas. Independent volunteers can return later, cover micro areas, and apply different technologies. Yet independent searches must be coordinated carefully with police to avoid disturbing potential evidence or creating contamination issues. Please Bring Me Home says it will share any finds with RCMP. Investigators emphasize the importance of that cooperation. Family members and some relatives genuinely hope a fresh volunteer pass will either find something missed before or provide new clues to test in a forensic lab. The family's perspective remains painfully split from the public debate. Some relatives, among them the children's aunt and paternal grandmother, say they do not believe the kids simply wandered off, given the scale of searches that yielded little. They have urged more probing work and supported volunteer efforts to recheck waterways and isolated hollows. The mother initially told police in her report that the children had wandered away from the yard, an account that launched the search. Over time, however, the family has debated different explanations in public and private, and some people close to the family have floated alternative theories, including that the children may have been taken by someone they knew. Investigators, meanwhile, have had to isolate what is factual and provable, camera footage, physical traces, phone metadata, from rumor and grief-driven speculation. That distinction is not callous. It's fundamental to building a court-proof case should prosecutable evidence ever emerge. Two related themes run through what the unsubstantiated vehicle reports, the physical findings, and the volunteer plans collectively teach us. First, modern missing person investigations are hybrid exercises of community energy and forensic exactness. Second, public attention both aids and burdens the investigative process. Community involvement encourages tips and preserves footage that could be decisive, and yet the same public intensity propagates misinformation and can strain resources when false leads proliferate. That tension explains why police emphasize submitting credible, preserved video directly to investigators rather than posting it on social platforms where it may be altered, misinterpreted, or spread as an unverified claim. Investigative teams prefer sealed delivery of original files because metadata, the timestamps and GPS forensics contained in original files, is often more valuable than a viral re-upload. As the season tightens toward winter, both volunteer groups and investigators say there is a narrowing window to look in some environments before snow and ice change access and evidence conditions. This reality has driven renewed volunteer interest in waterways and small hollows where subtle traces might be preserved in different seasonal conditions. Police say they will consider volunteer findings as new evidence points arise, and they have reiterated that any recovered items will be processed under chain of custody protocols to preserve their evidentiary value. Families and volunteers emphasize urgency. Police emphasize the methodical steps needed to preserve future prosecutorial options. So where does this leave us now? The RCMP cannot confirm the late-night vehicle reports as a verified fact. Surveillance footage did not support the neighbor accounts, and no driver or vehicle has been positively identified as present near the trailer at the time in question. Investigators treat the case under missing persons frameworks while retaining the option to escalate if corroborative physical or digital evidence emerges suggesting criminal activity. Tangible physical clues such as the blanket fragment and matching boot impressions are under forensic review, but their significance hinges on preserving context and excluding contamination. Volunteer searches and independent efforts will recheck difficult areas like waterways and hollows, but those efforts must be coordinated with police to preserve evidentiary value. Above all, the case remains unresolved. Investigators continue to comb thousands of tips and hours of video, test forensic samples, and re-interview witnesses as new leads unfold. We must also remember the human toll. 2 small children are missing, and their family sits inside a painful limbo. The community wrestles with grief, rumor, and hope. Investigators pledge steady, patient work, volunteers pledge continued search energy, relatives plead for answers. The path to clarity is neither fast nor guaranteed. It depends on preserved footage, reliable eyewitness corroboration, forensic breakthroughs, or a credible tip that withstands legal and scientific scrutiny. In closing, this investigation is a study in caution and persistence. The RCMP's refusal to treat unverified vehicle reports as a central fact is not indifference. It is an insistence on provable truth before shifting investigative weight. Independent volunteers can surface the small clues that transform a rumor into a lead, but their work must be carefully coordinated so it aids, rather than hinders, forensic integrity. If you have footage, a dashcam clip, or a message that might be relevant, preserve the original file and pass it to investigators rather than posting it publicly. Small, verifiable details often become the hinge on which a case turns. We will continue to follow verified developments and bring you clear, careful explanations of each new piece of evidence as investigators confirm it. For now, hold space for Jack and Lily, and demand the thoroughness that both the family and the search for truth deserve.